Hey folks, your OS Reviews. You're watching our video unboxing and first impressions look at the UHANS Max 2. This is a 4G unlocked quad-band phablet which runs on Android 7.0 Nougat. It sells on GearBest for $140, which is actually a fairly low-cost price for a 6.5-inch phablet. It also features a biometric fingerprint scanner in addition to dual camera setups, both for the rear camera and for the front camera. So having those dual cameras means you can produce a bokeh effect that makes the background fuzzy and overall improves the image quality in certain scenarios. Otherwise, the phone itself has a MediaTek quad-core processor. It also comes equipped with 4 gigs of RAM, and there are configurations for memory that goes all the way up to 64 gigabytes. So memory configuration options are all fairly impressive. So this is what the packaging looks like. You can see it looks pretty fancy. Now, UHANS is a company based in Shenzhen, China, so it's not one that we've heard too much about here in the States, but nonetheless, they have been making cell phones for quite a few years now. Battery capacity is rated at 4,300 milliamp hours, which is also quite large. And you can see we have the 64 gigabyte ROM version. And in addition, the device itself does have Wi-Fi, GPS, and Bluetooth. Lifting up the box, we are graded to what looks like just the phone right on top. We'll take a closer look at this in a second. In the first compartment, we should have the accessories, and they correspond to a standard micro USB cable for charging. Now, I do wish it was using USB Type-C instead, but nonetheless, it works for charging and for data transfer. And on the other side, it looks like we have just a standard USB-based wall charger that can plug in for charging purposes. Over here, we have just the phone itself, and it seems like that's it. Underneath, we do have an instruction manual that's documented in color that tells you how to insert the 2 SIMs. This is a dual SIM phone, but you don't have any headphones included right out of the box. Now, the phone itself does have a few aluminum accents, so as far as construction is concerned, it's not bad at all, and should feel much more premium than the price would suggest. Otherwise, there's also a SIM ejector tool included in the packaging, and that's it. So let's take a quick look at the design of the phone first. Again, at 6.5 inches diagonally for the display alone, this is definitely more of a device. So if you've experienced tablets in the past, which include devices like the LG G Flex or a Samsung Galaxy Note, you'll be right at home. Even though this phone doesn't have a stylus, again, it is quite large and bridges the gap between a true tablet and a smaller cell phone, which may have a 5-inch display. On the back here, we have some basic IMEI information. There's also, again, the phone's rear, which is made out of aluminum, and it also tells you a little bit of details about how to properly install the SIM cards on the sides. So let's remove this protective film from the edges. There we go. And there's also what looks like one covering up the lens of the camera. There's that flash in between the 2 camera setups, you can see there. And on the bottom, you have access to the stereo speakers in addition to the micro USB port for charging and data transfer. The edge here features access to the power key. Let's tap on this to see if there's any power remaining on the phone for an initial boot. And there's also the volume rocker. There's the SIM card port, which needs to be ejected with that pin. The top features a standard 3.5mm headphone jack, which is nice to see. And there's nothing on the other edge, so fairly clean as far as design is concerned. On the front here, you can see that there is a screen protector that has been pre-installed. Let's try and remove this second layer. And we are graded to a very glossy and generous 6.5-inch display, as aforementioned. Down below here, we see that biometric fingerprint scanner that dubs as a home button, and on top there is the earpiece along with, again, dual cameras from the front-facing camera, and there's even an LED flash. So it seems that photography, even for selfies at least, should be quite good on the Max 2. So we're graded to a pretty stock version of Android 7.0 Nougat. I'm going to skip the adding your account screen and add this maybe for later. Just go next just to continue, and hopefully we'll be graded to a fairly vanilla build of Android. This is what the keyboard looks like. You can see it's just using the stock Android Nougat keyboard, and because the screen is so large, you do get a pretty generous experience. It seems to be pretty sensitive. The phone, of course, supports multi-touch. Let's try adding a fingerprint here. And then tap on the fingerprint scanner at the bottom a few times to finally initialize this. It's going to ask me to kind of change the position just ever so slightly so it maps a larger surface area of my thumb. So regardless if I'm using any orientation, it should unlock it with relative accuracy. And pretty much I'm done with the setup. Some other things I want to quickly point out, the phone itself does have fairly small bezels. It does have kind of a 2.5D or a curved edge display on the sides. You can see how the glass tapers off at the edges, almost like a bubble. It just makes navigation and swiping left and right between the edges feel a little bit more comfortable. I also misspoke earlier about the processor. It's actually a Octa-Core 1.5 gigahertz processor. So UHANS are going for a relatively high-end set of hardware specs, at least on paper here. Again, along with that 4 gigs of RAM, it should really be sufficient for gaming and even for intensive multitasking. The display, it does have a full 1080p resolution, so it is quite crisp, even though the size is very large. And additionally, the phone itself has the GPU, which is the Mali T860, which is also, again, relatively high-end for a MediaTek device. So all in all, fairly impressive as far as specs are concerned. Alright, so you can see that the home screen here is fairly traditional. There's just one screen, it seems like, by default. You have all the standard Google utilities, including access to the Play Store for downloading apps by default. There's your camera, and then you have standard kind of Google settings. Really nothing that's out of the ordinary. You do have virtual controls on the bottom as opposed to being physically implemented on the edges, and the fingerprint scanner here doesn't really depress that much. It can be used to go back home, but you just gently tap on it. The main menu drawer, you can see, just swipes up and down, just like on a clean vanilla install of Android 7.0. There are very little surprises here, and there's even no bloatware at all that's been pre-installed, which is actually quite impressive. Display, again, very sensitive, and it seems like the viewing angles are also quite generous from a first impressions perspective. It gets quite bright, and it's using IPS technology. So before we end this video, here's a quick, size comparison between some other phones. This is a average kind of 5-inch phone. This is the Ficom Passion 660. So you can really tell the difference in size here. A little bit comical, but again, this is really a phablet, whereas this might be a more typical sized phone. And here's an even smaller kind of 4-inch phone that we reviewed earlier. So you get a better idea of the size, even though the UHANS 2 is already quite slim as far as the bezels as well as the width is concerned. So all in all, I have to say that I'm pretty impressed as far as first impressions are concerned about the UHANS Max 2 phablet. We'll be doing more testing in the following days and come out with a more complete review soon. But thanks for watching here at OS Reviews. This has been our video unboxing and first impressions look at the UHANS Max 2 4G Android phablet.